Republicans, we need mass amnesty for undocumented immigrants. I know that title sounds like I'm rage baiting, but I'm not. Hear me out from start to finish. This is not a soft on crime speech. It's about getting serious results, safer borders, stronger labor markets, lower chaos, and a deal that finally allows us to move forward in a positive way as the United States of America. Let's start with the terrible things we all clearly see right in front of us. Border encounters were running high in recent years, especially before Trump took office. It's been messy. It's been politicized. And every single news clip looks like the system is at capacity. And that's because, well, honestly, it is. You don't have to love Trump's rhetoric to admit the basic math. DHS and the courts are drowning. They've been drowning. The immigration courts, just alone, carried a multi-million case backlog by 2024 to 2025, with over 1.5 million asylum applications pending. And only recently did completions start to outpace new filings. That's insane. That's terrible. Those inefficiencies have rightfully been in the spotlight, because that's absolutely pathetic. I'm also not going to pretend every undocumented person here is just looking for a better life. Republican media makes sure to emphasize whenever an undocumented person does something terrible. And there is definitely a substantial number of undocumented people living in the states that do not have great intentions. Some are committing crimes. Some are gaming the system. We should find those people first as an absolute priority, then prosecute and remove them. Hard stop and snappy. That has to be non-negotiable. But now, let's get honest about the part that nobody on the right wants to say out loud. A huge share of the undocumented population has been here for years. They work, they raise kids, they file taxes. Yes, they file taxes. In 2022, undocumented immigrants paid roughly $97 billion in federal, state, and local taxes. Much of it payroll taxes they can't even collect benefits from. And tens of billions went specifically into Social Security and Medicare that they aren't even eligible to draw on. That's not a Democratic talking point like so many people say. It's just the truth. And despite all of the memes, they're generally not eligible for federal means-tested benefits like SNAP, regular Medicaid, TANF, or ACA premium subsidies, or even government housing. The law is very clear on that. Emergency Medicaid is available for life-threatening care, yeah, sure, but that's a small little sliver of total Medicaid spending, and it doesn't look anything like comprehensive coverage that you and I probably have. So the story many of us repeat or see on the news or hear from your conservative uncle at Thanksgiving, that they come to live off the government, is mostly wrong, to say the least, at least on the federal level. So if the reality on the ground is millions of undocumented immigrants are here, working, paying, but stuck in the shadows, we have to ask a grown-up question. What is the end game for us? Deport them all sounds tough until you actually read into it. A conservative think tank ran that math and came back with an estimate of costing taxpayers, wait for it, $400 to $600 billion in federal costs. Roughly 20 years to execute and deep hits to the economy. That's your tax money and your labor force bleeding out for 2 decades to produce what? A smaller economy and millions of U.S. citizen kids in chaos? I'm not quite sure that's considered a victory. Now add the American demographic catastrophe that no one can wish away. Our fertility rate has dropped to around 1.6 children per woman, well below levels of replacement. We are projected at very slow labor force growth through the 2020s and 2030s as the population ages. Simply put, we don't have enough young workers coming up behind the boomers. Point blank. We are already depending on immigration, legal and otherwise, to keep the lights on in very key industries. If you try to pull a few million working age people out of the economy for whatever reason, you will feel it in the prices, in the backlogs, and in our care capacity. What do I mean by that? Because this is actually important and something that no one really focuses on the right, but we should. If you suddenly remove a few million working age people from the US labor force, many of whom are concentrated in hands-on, hard-to-automate jobs, you shrink the supply of labor overnight. When the supply of something drops and demand stays the same, or maybe even rises, the price of that thing goes up, right? So in labor markets, price equals wages. And higher wages in those sectors shows up as higher prices for what they produce. Food, construction, restaurant meals, home repairs, childcare, elder care, hospital support services. Fewer workers means tighter hiring, which means higher costs to produce, which means higher prices passed to us, the consumers. Now, take that and combine it with this. We are an aging country. Demand for care work like home health, aides, nursing assistants, long-term care staff is rising. Those jobs already have shortages. Now, pull workers out and you don't just get higher prices, you get capacity problems. Fewer available aides, closed hospital beds, longer wait lists, shorter clinic hours. I mean, care capacity is a serious concern that we must acknowledge when talking about mass deportations. Many undocumented workers are clustered in bottleneck sectors: agriculture and food processing, construction and trades, hospitality and cleaning, delivery and logistics, frontline hospital support, the people handling a lot of the administration. When those bottlenecks tighten, everything downstream slows down. Harvests take longer, so now produce prices spike. Homes take longer to build, which means rent stays high. Hotels and restaurants cut hours, which means service delays. And hospitals struggle to staff non-clinical roles, which means longer waits, and nurses are forced to spend more time on administration instead of focusing on providing care. We can't replace people in these roles instantly. Even if higher pay eventually attracts more US citizens into those jobs, that adjustment takes time. Recruiting, training, certification, background checks. All that will just create higher prices for consumers and more system backlogs. The exact thing we don't need right now. Imagine a city that relies on, for this example, let's say 100,000 workers to keep farms, job sites, kitchens, warehouses, and elder care facilities running. If 4,000 to 5,000 of those workers disappear, Thanos style, gone, the to-do list doesn't disappear. The same number of patients still needing bathing and turning. The same lettuce still needs picking before it wilts. The same insulation still needs to go in before winter hits. With fewer hands, tasks pile up. The definition of backlogging, right? And the remaining workers now must be paid more to do more or work less desirable shifts. So here's the deal I'm proposing, and I'm aiming this squarely at conservatives who want an outcome, not just a slogan to campaign on. First, we fix the flows and the magnets. The flows being the actual ways migrants find their way over here illegally. Magnets being the incentives that help them make the decision to come here illegally. So how do we do this? Speed asylum processing so BS claims don't ride, a 3 or 4 year wait list. Get serious surveillance at ports of entry where the trafficking and hard contraband actually moves through. Hammer the demand side by punishing employers who knowingly hire off the books. Turn off the job magnet and you'll turn off a lot of illegal entries. That's just how incentive structures work. We all know that when rules are credible and swift, behavior changes incredibly quickly. Then, once the pipeline is under control, we do a one-time amnesty for the people who have already proven they belong here in every way that matters, right? Years in the country, a clean record, steady work, and no reliance on public benefits. You put them on a line with background checks, fines, English and civics tests, courses, and a work authorized status that can convert to permanent residence after a probationary period. I think it's genius. You want to call it earned legalization or, probationary residency? Cool, fine. What it is closing the books so that we can finally police the border like we mean it without pretending we can just rewind the last 15 years. The point is outcomes, secure borders, legal workforce, and an economy that doesn't run in the shadows. Because, here's something that no one on the right wants to talk about. But we should. And I don't understand how this isn't a bigger deal to conservatives. The shadow economy hurts everyone. And by shadow economy I mean undocumented immigrants working here off the books. When a worker can't negotiate openly, wages sag for them and for citizens working in the same shop or industry. When people live off the books, they don't build credit, they don't invest in training, and they don't move up the ladder. Allow them to work outside of the shadows. Allow them to work in the light, and two things happen that conservatives should love. Tax compliance increases, and wage competition both move onto the field of legal work, not the lame, dark alleyway behind it. We've seen this every single time we've expanded work authorizations. Earnings rise, and so do tax receipts. And if you're worried about creating, like what I referenced earlier, if you're worried about creating a magnet, that's exactly why I'm insisting on keeping the sequence the way I've presented it. Enforcement and speed first. Amnesty after. One time. No more winking and nodding. If you try to deport your way out of an aging workforce and a court backlog while leaving the magnets in place, you'll spend a fortune and continue to see illegal immigration pouring into the country. Maybe not this year, maybe not next year, but eventually you will. If you legalize first without fixing flows, you'll repeat 1986. If you do legalization without fixing the incentives and the legal pathways, you get a brief reset. And then the same problems rebuild. Getting rid of either flows or magnets alone fails. It has failed in the past and will continue to fail every single time. Together is the only plan that can actually work. And you have to fix those issues before issuing the one-time amnesty that I'm proposing. So when I say you'll repeat 1986, I'm trying to emphasize the sequencing problem. If you legalize first, but don't, 1, make hiring rules credible and swift, 2, speed asylum and immigration adjudication, and 3, create legal ways to meet ongoing labor demands, you'll simply refresh the same shadow population and be right back here later. Conversely, if you only crack down without dealing the long settled population or labor market realities, or if you crack down on all this without dealing with the long settled population or the labor market realities that we're facing right now, you'll spend a fortune, create a lot of chaos, and create very little lasting change. And that's one thing that I'm very concerned is going to happen with the way that we are currently approaching all the undocumented immigrants living here right now and, securing the border. So think about that. Because I personally think that it's the best way forward for Democrats, for Republicans, for everyone. But now let's talk about the fairness question, right? Because I hear this all the time. Is this fair to people who waited in line? No. And I get that. It's absolutely not fair. But we also have to be fair to the citizens who've been paying for a status quo that doesn't work. We've already let millions of undocumented immigrants cement themselves into our towns and businesses while Congress talk their talk and refuse to update the system. The cleanest conservative answer moving forward is not to keep a permanent underclass off the books. It's to settle accounts once, cut off the incentives that created this, and move forward with a system that's enforceable as soon as possible. Now, what about the cost, right? Of course, amnesty is not free. But compared to the $400 to $600 billion enforcement fantasy that shrinks the economy, a one-time earned path coupled with credible employer enforcement looks like the fiscally conservative option. The best one, at least. Because it turns current shadow workers into higher earning, higher tax paying legal workers and this is important too, it lets ICE focus resources and focus their resources on actual threats. The people committing crimes, the people planning to commit crimes, etc. They aren't wasting their time and resources on the guy working at the car wash down the street. So here's my ask of Republicans watching this. If you want the border under control, if you want fewer incentives for illegal entry, if you want wages to compete on a legal field, if you want courts and agents focused on truly dangerous actors, and if you care about the country's worker shortage, then the tough adult choice is a one-time earned amnesty paired with real enforcement and faster adjudication. Secure the flows, turn off the job magnet, and bring the long-settled, clean record workers into the light. We can keep running on flashy deportation slogans, or we can actually fix the problem. And I'm sick of politicians refusing to fix the problem. Now, I posted something on my Instagram about supporting mass amnesty for undocumented immigrants and got quite a few DMs about it. So I think it's good to address a couple of those DMs because it helps us better understand the issue. If you were white, you'd want all illegal immigrants deported. Why? I mean, assuming this isn't just based in racism, let's forget for a second that undocumented immigrants, regardless of color, currently contribute nearly $1 billion in taxes every single year, that they hold jobs in industries like agriculture, construction, elderly care, and others that we are currently struggling to find enough labor for, and that the majority of these people are good people working to create a better life for themselves and their families. Let's forget all of that. Personally, I think the culture that these people bring with them is far better than the mainstream young American culture we've created here in America. It isn't first or second generation immigrants from Mexico, Cuba, or Ecuador that are preaching DEI, radical feminism, or communism. Those are Americans. Americans are the ones becoming lazier and indulging in victim mentality and asking for government handouts. So if your statement isn't solely based in some lame racism, what's your argument here? Doesn't make any sense to me. As a Republican, how can you support mass amnesty for illegals? Okay, so let's just break it down really quick. First of all, I don't support mass amnesty for all undocumented immigrants. If you've been committing crimes or depending on government benefits, you're out of here. But remember, it's going to take hundreds of billions of taxpayer dollars to mass deport all undocumented immigrants. Undocumented immigrants contribute roughly $100 billion in federal, state, and local taxes every single year. Tens of billions of that goes into things like Social Security and Medicare, which they can't even collect from. A lot of these undocumented immigrants do take jobs that American citizens simply don't want. And our population is aging because we're not having enough kids to replace all of the boomers in the workforce, right? That and the majority of these people are good people just working for a better life for themselves and their family. Let's never forget that. Cut off the flow and destroy the incentives for illegal immigration. Get all the ones that have never contributed to the economy or commit crimes out of the country, and then give the remaining people a work-authorized status that can convert into permanent residency after a probationary period. These people are already an ingrained, important base in our economy. I mean, tell me how that's not the best option for us moving forward. All right, y'all, this is already a pretty long video, so I'm going to end it there. I hope you have a great day.